Let's say you have your Terraform configuration and you have some external dependencies which are defined, right? Now, majorly, whenever you're defining or defining some dependencies, they will be respect to your uh, two things, right? One is your providers and is your modules, right? So if you see, Terraform configuration may refer to two different kind of external dependencies from outside of your code base. One is your providers and other is your modules, right? Two things which you refer. Let me just copy this. So one is your provider. Is there something we can do for this? I think we can do, right? Rule B and your modules, right? So two things. So providers, which are plugins for the Terraform, right? Because it will tell you that okay, which provider you are using, correct? Or let's say when you reference some provider, there are one is your AWS providers, right? Like AWS, other things. In some cases, you can refer provider to some module which you are referring that okay, this will be referenced with respect to some module, right? So for modules, there is another section which they say, which allows splitting out groups of Terraform configuration construct written in the Terraform language into reusable abstract, right? So you create several modules, and the purpose of the modules is that you can reuse that multiple times in your code, right? So is that clear, everyone? So you have two external dependencies which is there. Now there is also one more thing which is known as your version constraints, right? And when you're using the version constraints, your Terraform let you a specific range of acceptable versions, right? For something like that, okay, Terraform version you are using is greater than equal to 1.0.0. As of now, the latest Terraform version is, I think it is 5, right? So let's go and check on the Terraform website. So there is a version constraint within the configuration itself. Determine which version of dependency is and potentially compatible. But after selecting a specific version of each dependency, Terraform remembers the decision it made in the dependency log file, right? So we'll come to that. But before that, let's see the Terraform version constraint. Let me close these tabs.
Sir, what is the difference between this provider and module? Can you?
So that is what we'll be discussing. Just give me a moment. Let's first talk about the versions.
Okay.
Terraform constraint or Terraform version constraints. So anywhere when you're defining the Terraform, so Terraform lets you specify a range of acceptable versions for something. It expects a specifically formatted string known as version constraint. Version constraints are used when configuring modules and provider requirements, right? So I think it was Swati, right? So Swati, when you define several modules, so the use case of the module is, let's say you are defining, you are creating an application for calculator, right? Now you have defined 4 to 5 different functions. Now you are calling those functions as a part of your main function, which is your calculator function. Now those functions which you have defined separately, in one function you do addition, other you do subtraction, in other you do division, other you do multiplication, right?
So
So
each function we call it as a module, right?
right, so that you can reuse those things multiple times, right?
Okay.
Anything or any module which you write, which can be reused into your main code multiple times, that is being referred to as your module, correct? You are
Yeah.
doing this to divide your code into smaller structure, and you can easily find out errors at the time of troubleshooting that okay, this was the issue with that respective module, so we have to only troubleshoot that. That is first thing. Second thing, you reduce the time complexity of the code because when you are referencing that modules, the runtime of your main program is very less. When you reference that module, then only you're executing that part. You don't have to execute all the modules which are there unless and until they are referenced or unless and until they are called. That is how programming language works, right? Correct? In
Yeah.
C, C++, Java, everywhere when you define some functions or classes or where you have child classes or something, you call them into the main class, right? Similarly, you're defining some submodules which you're calling them into the main module whenever they are required.
Yeah,
Is it clear?
understood. Yeah,
Right?
yeah, it's
Correct. So, and similarly, whenever you are working with your provider, provider is kind of a file definitions or provider is some kind of a, let's say, small database where you are keeping all your definition of that respective provider, right? Why I'm saying that? Because let's say if you're working with your provider in Terraform, so Terraform providers, right? So you, although we'll be coming on this later on, but let's see that now as well. So these are what? These are providers in which they have saved your AWS specific thing that in case if you want to work with AWS, you have to define the AWS provider. So the current version of the AWS provider is 5.0, 5.66.0, correct? So you can define in your code that I want to use the version of the provider as greater than equal to 5.55 or something like that, correct? Is it fine, Swati?
yes, understood.
Okay, so now let's say we go back. So here what they are saying, you have your Terraform, which you specify a range of acceptable versions for something. It expects specifically format. So what is the format? This is the format. Version is equal to greater than equal to this and less than equal to this. So any version which is falling in between, that is an acceptable constraint or acceptable version, right? If you see, this is something which we have defined in our code as well. Here, the version we have defined as greater than equal to this, right? Here we can add a less than as well. But we are aware that okay, anything which is more than this is fine, correct? Ideally, you can define greater than and less than as well. Is it clear? Right, everyone?
Yes,
What
sir.
what what we are defining in Terraform constraint? So I will copy this as well. So version constraint, these three things are you are defining. And when you are doing this, you need a specific syntax. And what that syntax is? Syntax is this. Terraform syntax version is this. This is what is important for you. Let me change the color. Correct, everyone? So version constraint are clearly telling you what is the version which is supported on this. And when you're defining your dependency log file, in case if there is any kind of changes which has been done on a specific version or anything is missing, it can go and to the dependency log file and can see okay, this dependency log file was created on that specific version, so we should be using that specific version only in case we are doing any new changes. Correct, everyone? Now if you want to, this was one part, right, that you are including a range, right? Ultimately when you are defining this, you are defining a range of let me just write. You're defining a range of this. So this is a which we have defined. But let's say we have to exclude something, right? We have to exclude something. So which means for doing that, you have to define something that, okay, it should be greater than equal to this or greater than equal to along with less than this. That is one, and it is less than equal to. So multiple scenarios you can consider, right? That instead of giving a range from A to B, you can give these kind of syntax as well. Only one part. So here we are using two, this one, but in case you want to use these other two, you can use that as well. Correct? Now, when you are defining your version constraint, right? In this, your configuration itself determines which version of dependencies are potentially compatible, right? Also, Terraform is remembering some kind of decisions that, okay, which it has made at the part of your dependency file. Still, we have not talked about dependency file yet, so don't worry about that. What this dependency file is, right? Now, in this dependency file, what we are placing, let me just quickly go back. In this dependency,
It's third one, sir. Third one.
yes. Okay, so Terraform configures maybe two different kinds of external dependencies, right? Which is depending upon your providers and modules. What is providers, what is modules, we have discussed, right? Now, both these dependencies can be published and updated independently from Terraform itself and from the configuration, and it depends on them that what they are using, right? For that reason, Terraform must determine which version of those dependencies are potentially compatible within the current configuration and which versions are currently selected for use, right? So when you are creating this file, Terraform says that, okay, which provider I should be using or what is the specific version I should be capturing. Everything it creates a note, a small text, it writes everything and it saves that as a part of your dependency log file. So next time when the plan run, this plan you run again. So what happens? It will say that, okay, I am evaluating the infra, but where is my dependency log file? Okay, what version I use for creating that infrastructure? So there is a cached file in your environment, which is known as, just like you have a Terraform cache, Terraform state file, there is a dependency log file which is also created, right? And that dependency log file is capturing the information of the versions which are compatible for you, right? So for that reasons, Terraform must determine which versions of those dependencies are potentially compatible with the current configuration and which versions are currently selected for use, right? So that is why you are using it. Also, in your version controls, within the configuration itself, determine which versions of dependencies are, it is saying the same thing. So, but after selecting a specific version of each dependency, Terraform remembers the decision it made in dependency log file so that it can, by default, make same decisions again in future. So you got the point. This is what we discussed earlier as well, that you have saved some dependencies in that file. Now you are capturing and reading that dependency that, okay, these were the decisions I made with respect to that providers or with that version. Now I have to make similar decisions. I should not be going here and there and making some new amendment with the latest versions. Otherwise, your code will crash, right? To avoid code crashing or to avoid some kind of complexity with the new versions, we define or we have this dependency log file, correct? So at present, the dependency log file tracks only provider dependencies, right? Terraform does not remember version selection for remote modules or and so Terraform will always select the newest module available, right? So it is only tracking the provider dependencies, and providers are AWS, Azure, whatever we are defining. And we are also passing the versions. And how do we pass the versions? We pass the versions like this. So if we have planned that, okay, in the previous plan I used these versions and I did some constraints, or we defined something at that time, so now we'll be using that only. We'll not be going away from it. Is it clear, everyone? Make sense? Is it clear now? Anyone who is not clear? So what is dependency lock, Swati? Why are we using dependency lock file? What is captured in dependency log file? What is being tracked as a part of dependency file? I think the answer is right here, right? The dependency log file tracks only provided dependencies which are there, and it is not tracking any kind of remote modules which are there. Is it clear, everyone? Do you want me to copy and paste this? I think link I have already shared, but I will paste this link as well in case if you want to go and read about that.
So Abhimanyu, one query, Jagat
Mhm,
here. So
mhm.
this is mainly to maintain the consistency of the version across that the infra, right? For the
Yes,
particular provider.
correct.
So let's say that if we need to upgrade, so we need to remove that version from the log file, right? Let's say
So
that if I
let's say, first of
mm,
all, we should not be removing that version, correct?
We should create a new one and then destroy it.
Right. So, so what you do, you update your modules with the current version. So why we say that these dependencies should be exactly same? See, once you have deployed the code via Terraform, Terraform has released it. They keep on updating their versions or the provider version which they are releasing with
mm,
some new bug fixes, new changes, new additions. They have removed some kind of variables which were there, which were common. They can do anything. Now let's say Terraform defined some variable for doing something, but now in the latest version they have removed that variable, right? And that variable you have used as a part of the code, and you have defined some value. Now next in the newer version it will not find that variable, correct? So that is why what they say, that in case if there is any kind of existing infra which is there, you use that. But with this version, you can define a range that, okay, earlier I was using 1.2.0, but now let's say I'm using 5. So 1 dot greater than equal to 1.2.0 and less than equal to 5, or less than equal to 5.0.1. So at least any module which is 5.0 dot something will still be acceptable, and that will evaluate, and it will not look only the specific 5.0.0 in which everything has been changed. So it will track that, okay, I did make that the changes or decisions on the basis of this version. So I will remain stick to that. And newer version which is available for me, for new deployments, I will use the other version. Got the point? Why are we defining this range?
yes, yes, got it.
Right? Because Terraform will keep on updating. And you cannot make your infrastructure changes because you are running thousands of resources for a very long time. Just Terraform has released a newer version. You will not change the versions which are running on 1.0.0. Correct, Jagat?
Yes,
Clear?
yes, got it. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. So after that, there is a place where we will be keeping our dependency file location, right? Dependency file location. So what is that dependency file location? So dependency log file is the file that belongs to configuration as a whole rather than to each separate module in the configuration. Terraform creates it and expects to find it in your current working directory when you run Terraform. So wherever main.tf files are kept, right? And you execute the Terraform over there, right? So in that root module, it will create that dependency log file, correct? So the log file location. So log file location is the file that belongs to the configuration as a whole rather than to each separate module in the configuration, right? And for that reason, Terraform creates it and expects it to find it in your current working directory when you run Terraform, which is also the directory containing the .tf files for the root module of your configuration. So ultimately, this log.html is created, and in case if there is any kind of you are trying to move away from this, right, then it will not even let you run your Terraform apply, right? So is intended to signify that is a log file for various items that Terraform caches in .terraform subdirectory. So you have a .terraform in that subdirectory, it can be there. So let me see if I have something for that. Is there any place? Just give me a moment. I'm just trying to see if I can show you one file which is there. Okay, I think I did not run in this laptop, but I will show you later on maybe what is there in the dependency log file, right? Then it would be clear. Let's see if I have a file here. Okay, so I think log file location is it is sitting in the same directory where your files and folders where your .tf files are there, and when you execute your Terraform plan init something, it will go and fetch that files. It will read those files and see what decisions has been made previously, and on this log file, in case if multiple peoples are running on the repositories making changes, So this also restrict them to make or not able to make changes, right? So, and also in case you want to save this log file, so you can save this file on your Jenkins server in case if you are building your pipeline with this. So this log file is there, and you can, instead of saving the file on your local laptop, because you will be using some kind of a pipeline, so you can save this file on your Jenkins servers or the Atlantis server or GitHub Actions, whatever you have implemented, you can implement on that as well. Make sense, everyone? Where all we can use this, correct?
Yes, sir.
So Terraform automatically creates or updates the dependency log file each time you run the Terraform init command, correct? You should include this file in your version control repository so that you can discuss potential changes to your external dependencies via code. And the dependency log file uses the same low level syntax as the main Terraform language, but the dependency log file is not itself a Terraform language configuration file, right? It is named with suffix .hcl instead of .tf, right? Correct? It is saved as .hcl, not .tf, right? So these small things you have to note when you're working with this, right? So let me just paste it for your reference as well. So suffix, there is one thing. Student dependency file. Okay, yes, it is there. Now let's quickly move further. So now file location, everyone is clear. It is sitting or it is belonging to your configuration as a whole rather than to your each separate module. It is just being kept over there, right? So you can check the file that it is not created with your separate modules, but it is sitting at the one place which is needed or where it is defined. Correct, everyone? So dependency file is clear to everyone. Anyone who is still having confusion can ask now.
No doubts.
No doubt, right? Let's move forward.
Sir, once again said about the log file
Sorry,
definition, sir. Once again said, sir.
once again.
Uh, Once again, sir.
um,
Because
so
because I joined late, sir.
okay, so at what time you joined?
2 minutes before, sir.
So okay, so let's say, so first we are talking about this dependency log file in which there are two major dependencies which it is capturing, right? One is our providers and modules, in which as of now it is designed to capture providers dependencies, right? Now
Yes, sir.
provider dependencies depend upon the constraint, which is known as a version constraint. Now, this
Okay.
version constraint is that which version of Terraform you're using, or which version of the provider, let's say AWS, which version of that provider you are using. So, when you are using a specific version, so depending upon that specific version, Terraform must have made some decisions. On the basis of that, it has deployed the code, right? Now, when you are running your Terraform init, every time whenever you're running the Terraform init, this terraform.log.html files keeps on updating. And this log.html, this is the actual dependency file, which is capturing the dependencies of your provider. Correct? And there is something which
Yes,
is
sir.
kept as a part of the same folder where your Terraform files are kept, right? So it is kept in your root folders of where your Terraform files are there. That is what is a summary we discuss. So rest you can go through your recording, right,
Okay, sir.
Rajnish?
Okay. Thank you,
Abhinandan,
sir.
Yeah,
that version part,
yeah.
okay, so that we are defining, right? Like any dependency, like
No,
that
we are
should be
not defining. We are
okay.
defining in the code, but we have to see at the provider, right? That what is the provider version? What is the provider version? You have to be very specific. You have to be very close to the latest version.
Okay, then Terraform itself create those things that string literal version
Means
constraint.
so these are the versions which are released by Terraform, right? But let's say you have written some modules, right? So okay, so that is what why I was describing, right? That what is inside these versions. In these versions, you are defining some resources, right? And those resources is defined with the help of some variable, right? You use that variable as a part of your code. Now, let's say Terraform in a newer release remove that variable. Instead, that it is using something else. So now all your previous code is using that variable. So if you are moving to your new version directly, that okay, I will use 5.66. Your variable does not exist, right? And when you
Okay.
execute your Terraform plan, it will say that okay, this is not there. Now, keeping a track of that, what you said, that okay, I will define the version constraint as a part of the range so that my code is not being discarded or my code is not giving error, because there should be a specific range. I cannot keep on updating my infra with the new versions as soon as Terraform is releasing it.
Okay.
My
Yeah. I got that. So we are providing that range, right?
Yes, we are defining, but that range is coming from here.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
have
I got that. So the working version will be tracked by Terraform, right?
yes,
Okay.
and
So
that
we
is
should
what is sitting as a
we
part of
should
the
provide the range by checking the latest version till the whichever working version. Like in that case, what you provide 1.2.0 something like that. So that we have to
yes,
provide.
yes. So you have to evaluate which
Uh-huh.
was the version you used first of all. If you are not using 1.0, let's say this must have started from 1.0 or 0.1, but you
Okay.
started the deployment from 3.5 something.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
will not go and define 1 dot something. You'll go and use your specific versions.
But you said some working version, I mean, the example what you quoted. So in that case, obviously, right? So we have to give that range.
So, okay, so for working versions, all the versions are working. Today, if you are using a 5.6.000, it is the latest version which is there, right? But
Yes.
previously, if AWS says, sorry, HashiCorp says that we have discarded version 1.0.0, then you cannot use 1.0.0.
Yeah. If Terraform explicitly discard, then fine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So if you go to this tags, these are the tags, right? These are the versions which they have released. Because ultimately, these providers are piece of code only. So it started from v.0.1.1. So it can be anything which you are using, right? But we have to keep the range small. It is not that I can keep from 0.1.0. It will not give you any problem, but you have to be closer to the latest release so that people are not using or the in the team not using some older releases, right? You have to move further towards the latest one. So you have to keep the range small. It should be never be less than 5.66. Anything less than 5.66.
Yeah. Got that. Got that.
Correct? So think from a team perspective that there will be 10, 20 per person working on my team. One person is working with the latest modules. Other person is working with the legacy modules. Now newer person joins a team, right? So with changes, there will be a lot of modifications which Terraform has released from this version 10.1 till 5.6.6, right? Correct, Mahesh? There will be lot.
Yes. Yes. Yes, Abhinandan. Yes.
So you have to always use in your code the latest version. That is what should be the means. That is what should be the idea.
Requirement. Yeah. Idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's quickly come back. So okay, so Terraform is creating and it is looking at your current directory, and that directory should have a .tf files for the root module of your configuration. Now the file which you are using is one thing which should be clear to you is .terraform.log.html. This is your dependency log file, and in this your dependencies are saved. So Terraform automatically creates or updates this dependency log file, and each item is updated as soon as you run your Terraform init, right? In case if there is some kind of difference or it will give you some errors, and by doing that, you can fix those errors as well. It will show you that okay, this error is there, and you will search and troubleshoot the errors. Those will be filled, right? Now, it is also mentioned over here. Let me just write, add a space. So the dependency log file uses the same low level main Terraform language, means the syntax in the dependency level file is same, but here the suffix which you use is use .hcl instead of .tf. That is a difference between the log file and another one, right? Now there are several scenarios which you can also consider. Like let's say you ran Terraform in it, right? So you install the provider needed for the config. Terraform considered both version constraints and version selection recorded in the file. Sorry, the version selection recorded in the log file, right? You have defined that. Now, first case, let's say if the provider has no existing recorded selection, right? So then Terraform will use the newest available version that will match the given version constraint, and it will update your log file to the latest, or it will include that selection. Getting the point? As case one, scenario one, your terraform.log.html doesn't have a version or information available, and you have defined your version constraint at the latest one that it should be lesser than something. So you, what you will say that okay, I should be using the one which is of the highest value or the newest version which is available. I will use that, and you will update that into the log file as well, right? Now let's say another scenario. If you have a specific provider that is already present into the selection, which means it is present in your log files, right? So the Terraform will do what? It will reselect that version for installation instead of the newest version. Correct, everyone? You got the point
Yes, sir.
or not? Right? So multiple cases, multiple scenarios you have to keep in mind when you are doing it, right? So there is a scenario as well that suppose if you want to override this behavior, right? We can define a Terraform upgrade option, right? While running your init command, correct? You have an option of Terraform upgrade, and with the help of init command, so it will not use the one version which is there in the dependency log file, right? And it will use the newest version. So Terraform init call will make changes to the log HCL file, and Terraform will mention that okay, this is the respective release, correct? So let us quickly go to the provider. So Terraform working installation, it is a provider. Let me search control. Terraform upgrade command is there. Upgrade. Okay. So let's read this. I think here it will define. So if a particular provider has no existing record selection, Terraform will select the newest available version that matches the given version constraint and then update the log file to that to include the selection, means the latest version. So if the particular provider already has selection recorded in the log file, Terraform will always reselect the version for installation, even if a newer version has become available, right? You can override that behavior by adding the dash upgrade option when you run Terraform init, in which case Terraform will disregard the existing selections and once again select the newest available version matching the version constraint, right? If a particular Terraform init call makes changes to the log file, Terraform will mention that as an output that Terraform has made some changes onto the provider dependency selection recorded in the term. Review those changes and commit them to your version control system if they represent changes you intend to make, right? So in case your changes have been inserted as a part of your log file, it will give you a message where they will say that in case the changes which has been given to this or they have shown, if you expect those changes and if you're fine with that changes, so then go ahead and make those changes and move ahead with this, and your Terraform dependency log file will be latest to the newer version, right? Terraform dependency log file will be updated to a newest version. Is it clear, everyone? So these small nitty-gritties are there which you need to take care of when you are running your dependency files or when you are running your Terraform modules with this. Is it clear with the dependency provider, dependency behavior?
Yes.
Should I
Yes, Abhinandan, yeah.
should I copy and paste it over there
Yeah, better. Yeah.
so that when you are revising, it would be very helpful. Okay, so coming back. Now let's say your dependency file problem is sorted, right? Now we have to work with the dependency on a new provider. So suppose if we add a new entity to the provider and you have certain requirements which have been clearly defined, right? For each modules which you are working. So you have to make sure that whenever you are running with your new providers or you are responding by selecting the newest version of the provider, which is in the new log file. So your new provider is the one which will take effect, right? So the new log itself file will require some additional information. I think that part should also be here. Yes. So if you add a new entry to the provider requirements for any module in your configuration, or if you add an external module that includes a new provider dependency itself, so Terraform init will respond to that by selecting the newest version of that provider, which meets all the version constraints in the configuration, and it will record its decision as a new provider block in the dependency file. So this is, let's say, a dependency file. It will add the respective versions, constraints that should be greater than this, and will keep that something as a record, right? And new file entry records will carry several pieces of information. And what is that piece of information? Your versions, your constraint, and your hashes, right? Versions, the exact version that Terraform selected based on the Terraform versions. You have several constraints which are there, and you have your hashes. Hashes are the number of checksums, means when you do the validation. So implementing the selected versions for the provider, the meaning these hashes is explained more under this, right? So that's something you can read. I think if you know this much with their dependency part, I think this is more than enough, right? If you want, we can talk more on this, but I think this is fine. Let me just paste it for you as well. So space is less, so I'll just keep it till here. So one, the log file will have versions. You will have constraints. And you have your hashes. So those are clearly defined in the file. If you see this part, versions, constraint, and hashes. These hashes are similar to when you are validating your checksums. The number of checksums that are all considered to be valid for the packages. That is what you're using. And similarly, there are new versions of the existing providers which is there. So if you run Terraform init dash upgrade and you ask Terraform to consider newer provider versions the on a different platform, then also you have to consider that. So let's if you go back, the other part, new versions on the existing provider, right? So if you run Terraform init dash upgrade to ask Terraform to consider newer provider versions that still match the configured versions constraint, this selected a newer version for the provider and update its existing provider block to reflect the change. So it will go and change the respective block. So which means it will remove the older one and it will add version is this, constraint is this, and that is what you should be using. It will remove the previous your hashes and it will add the new hashes which are there. Correct? So if you want a newer version of an existing provider, so you can use that. In the previous version, what we are doing, we were upgrading to a newer version and you were using the newer constraints, right? But here you are overriding it, correct? You're overriding it. So the primary effect of selecting a newer provider version is to change the value of version in the provider block. If the upgrade came along with a change to the configured version constraint, Terraform will also record that changes in the constraint value, right? These things may look complex, but once you have this file which is created and this creation is automatically happening, right? You're not doing it. It may look it is difficult to understand, but sometimes you will get this troubleshooting error with the provider. So at that time, you have to run this Terraform dash upgrade command. That is why we are learning this. Otherwise, no one goes into the complexity of Terraform till this level, right? No interviewer will be asking. In interview, it may they may ask, right, how you are fixing the problem with the providers, right? Then you can give them scenario that okay, in my organization I was working on some specific version, and with that version, we wanted to use a newest provider, so we just ran a dash upgrade, so it was able to upgrade and override the existing provider which was there and we accepted the changes which were there. Is it fine how to tackle provider related questions in the interview? Is it fine, everyone?
Yes, sir, got it.
Clear? And the link is already attached. So if you want to talk about more package and their checksums, how these checksums are working, so then you can definitely read more on that, right? There is no problem. You can definitely means everything we cannot go on whatever is on the Terraform website. But if you know this much, this is what you will need. This Terraform init dash upgrade is more than enough, correct? Now let's say if you are using your various tasks for your blocks or you are defining the configurations for your various packages, right? So let's say okay, did we miss anything important? No, right? No, I don't think it is there. Okay, I think this is more than enough, right? Now we'll talk about the syntax, right? So in syntax, whenever you are working, the majority of the Terraform language focuses on the practical use cases, right? Practical use case of the language and the specific construct it uses, right? So the pages in the sections offer more abstract view of the Terraform language. You have to just focus on these three things, right? That in the syntax, it is using configuration syntax, JSON configuration syntax, and style conventions, right? Style conventions. That is what you have to remember. Other things we will be seeing in later on, right? So, or should we go through now? Okay, so let's discuss that on whiteboard.